In CNN's 2024 presidential debate, the moderator asks Biden about the American people complaining that while the inflation has been slowing down, the grocery prices are not going any lower. In turn, he responds,
"The economy collapsed. There were no jobs. Unemployment rate rose to 15%. It was terrible."
As of May 2024, the U.S. inflation rate stands at 3.3% for the past 12 months, with the Consumer Price Index, CPI, unchanged from April after a 0.3% increase. The Bureau of Labor Statistics notes that falling gasoline and energy prices have balanced out a rise in housing costs. Although 3.3% may not seem significant compared to recent grocery prices, inflation has surged by 21.75% from January 2020 to May 2024, with high housing costs remaining a persistent issue. The next update on inflation will be available on July 11th, 2024. The cost of living continues to burden families and show a gap between economic indicators and everyday life. In this complex situation, what could the average American expect? Is the economy heading towards a better future, or is the inflation only going to be worse from here on out? According to a smart asset analysis, individuals need to earn over six figures to live comfortably in the most expensive states in the U.S. The term comfortable refers to having enough monthly income to follow a 50-30-20 budget, which allocates 50% of earnings for necessities like housing and utilities, 30% for discretionary spending, and 20% for savings or investments. Using data from the MIT Living Wage Calculator, the analysis determined the annual income required for a single person to meet this budget in each state. The 5 most costly states are Massachusetts, where one needs to earn $116,022, Hawaii at $113,693, California at $113,651, New York at $111,738, and Washington at $106,496. This is nearly double the U.S. median income for single, full-time workers, which is around $60,000, according to Labor Bureau data. The national median income needed for a comfortable living is $89,461, indicating that the 50-30-20 budget may not be feasible for most single individuals. This might be why Americans can barely feel the economic growth. A new Federal Reserve survey reveals that the proportion of Americans who feel they are doing okay financially has dropped to a 4-year low. In 2023, only 72% of U.S. adults felt financially stable, the lowest level since April 2020, and down from 78% in 2021. The decline is particularly notable among parents with children, with only 64% reporting financial stability this year compared to 69% in 2022. Inflation is a major factor in this sentiment, as 35% of the 11,400 survey respondents identified rising prices as their biggest financial challenge in 2023. Despite wage growth outpacing inflation since early 2023, the long-term effects of high inflation over the past few years have strained household finances. Although inflation peaked at 9.1% in June 2022, it has since moderated to around 3% for nearly a year, with the Consumer Price Index showing an 18% increase over the past 3 years. Consumer spending has remained strong, but there are signs of financial strain, as spending grew by 0.8% in March, while income only grew by 0.5%, indicating that Americans are overspending. Additionally, the savings rate has fallen to 3.2% as of March, half of its pre-pandemic level, and personal debt, including credit card and auto loan delinquencies, has surpassed pre-pandemic levels. Despite these challenges, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell expressed cautious optimism, noting that while significant progress has been made in reducing inflation, there is still work to be done to reach the Fed's 2% inflation target. When asked why Americans still feel unsatisfied with the supposed thriving economy, one Reddit user was able to sum it up properly. "I think the answer is rather obvious. A lot of the reason people still have negative feelings about the economy, despite lots of positive trends at the macroeconomic level, is because of consumer price inflation that has already happened in the recent past. That spike in consumer price inflation, which tended to disproportionately affect items that people tend to purchase very frequently, resulted in people feeling suddenly poorer and less able to maintain the standard of living they were accustomed to. Additionally, Jeff Stein, a White House economics reporter, deduced that the supplies are dwindling and production costs are skyrocketing because of agricultural shocks and natural disasters that are the reasons why resources are lagging behind.
Agricultural industrial shocks that have really made this situation very, very volatile.
He further explains that aside from the agricultural problems, there has been export restrictions in places like Ukraine that has slowed down the amount of supplies entering the country, and America is left to resort to imports that may be the reason for higher production costs. Additionally, lawmakers have urged President Biden to investigate grocery store chains for potential price manipulation. The report also highlighted that rising wages relative to inflation have stabilized purchasing power, but low to medium-income households face financial pressures due to high rents, food, and energy costs, impacting consumer spending. In April, overall food prices in the U.S. remained stable month over month, with a 2.2% increase year over year, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Grocery prices rose by 1.1% compared to the previous year, but fell by 0.2% from March. Economist Steve Reed noted that grocery prices are stabilizing, with fluctuations in specific categories due to temporary supply issues. Wage growth also impacts food prices, and the normal year-over-year food price increase is between 1% and 2%, according to economist Michael Swanson, who expects food inflation to stay in this range. A Reddit user stated, "Family of 4 eating fairly healthy, cooking 6 days a week at home. This used to be a grocery bill under $250 a week. Now it's $350 even with substitutions for beef. Very fortunate to afford $1,400 for food, but what are people doing who make $20 an hour?" Inflation refers to the sustained increase in the general price level of goods and services in an economy over time. This means $1 today buys less than $1 tomorrow. While a moderate level of inflation is considered healthy for economic growth, high inflation can have a number of negative consequences. It erodes purchasing power, meaning consumers can buy less with their income, impacting businesses and potentially slowing economic growth. Inflation can also create uncertainty, making it difficult for businesses to plan for the future and for consumers to make informed purchasing decisions. Recent events like the COVID-19 pandemic have disrupted supply chains and led to a surge in global demand for certain goods, contributing to the rise in inflation rates observed today. Back in June 2022, the inflation rose to around 9%. Additionally, the pandemic's lingering effects on the global supply chain continue to cause disruptions, from fuel costs to worker shortages. These disruptions lead to both shortages and higher transportation costs, which get passed on to consumers at the grocery store. A Reddit user from a community of frugal members said, "We don't eat out anymore. Maybe a restaurant once every month, but that's pushing it. We don't take the kids because that would double or triple the cost. I feel bad, but I am cooking every meal fresh for them." The shift in consumer habits during the pandemic, with more meals eaten at home, also contributes to high prices for some grocery items, as demand remains strong even if overall spending weakens. Grocery prices in the U.S. are 30% higher than they were 4 years ago, marking a significant burden on consumers and highlighting ongoing policy failures. The grocery industry, worth $1.03 trillion, has leveraged pandemic-related supply chain issues to raise prices while selling less food, benefiting from increased profits despite flat unit volumes. Major consumer packaged goods, CPG companies, dominate the market, leading to significant price increases across various categories such as soda, cheese, candy, and beef, while unit volumes have decreased. When people have low purchasing power, it triggers a domino effect across the entire economy. Individuals struggle to afford basic necessities, leading to difficult choices and increased stress. Their reduced spending power creates a ripple effect for businesses, resulting in decreased demand, reduced investment, and potential job losses. This ultimately weakens the economy, potentially leading to stagnation or recession. In extreme cases, deflation can set in, where even lower prices discourage spending further. Perhaps the most concerning consequence is the potential for social unrest and political instability when severe economic hardship brought on by low purchasing power becomes widespread. That's probably why the users of the community in Reddit are now having a hard time enjoying things outside of necessities. These sentiments from the Reddit users are all pointing to one thing. It's hard to afford a comfortable life right now in the US. What exactly is the state of the US economy that's making all these grievances the same for the average American? Despite an overall slowdown in inflation, several factors are keeping grocery prices high in the US. One reason is sticky pricing. Grocery prices rise quickly with inflation but are slow to decrease. Businesses are cautious about lowering prices due to potential profit loss or price wars. Furthermore, a lack of competition in certain industries, like meatpacking, allows large companies to potentially raise prices without much pressure to lower them. Finally, factors outside the U.S. economy, such as climate change and the war in Ukraine, disrupt crop yields and global food exports, further pressuring grocery prices upwards. While some price adjustments might occur eventually, the combined effect of these factors means it could take time for grocery bills to reflect the broader cooling trend in inflation. This price inflation is often driven by seller's inflation, where corporations raise prices during supply shocks, resulting in record profits. For example, top soda companies like Coca-Cola and Pepsi saw substantial price increases with declining volumes. Similarly, Kraft Heinz and Hershey's have also significantly increased prices while maintaining or reducing volumes to drive profits. Corporate profits have contributed significantly to inflation, with reports indicating that corporate greed accounts for a substantial portion of inflationary pressures. Workers are often blamed for high prices, but their share of national income has declined while corporate profits have soared. In a recent interview, President Biden dismissed concerns about a 30% rise in food prices, claiming people have money to pay these elevated prices. This response shows his disconnect from the struggles of Americans who can't afford necessities and his ignorance of his administration's data. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, average weekly paychecks have increased by about $150 under Biden, or 14.1% over 3 years. However, with prices rising 19.3%, real weekly paychecks have shrunk by about $50, or 4.4%. This has forced many families to rely on credit cards, pushing outstanding balances to $1.1 trillion amid record high interest rates. Contrary to Biden's claim, Americans are struggling to afford a 30% increase in food costs. Finance charges have exploded to over $200 billion per year, and higher interest costs are impacting mortgages, student loans, and car loans. A typical family has lost $8,100 in annual income since Biden took office. This cost of living crisis hits lower income families particularly hard. As more Americans buy cheaper items to save money, demand for foodstuffs typically bought by lower income households surges. For example, egg prices have risen 40.9% under Bidenomics. Other staples like flour, sugar, and butter have also seen significant price increases. Americans' incomes haven't kept pace with rising food prices due to failed public policies, excessive spending, borrowing, and money printing. Biden seems unaware of the extent of this problem and his role in it. Among prominent economists, none was more explicit than former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers in warning that President Joe Biden and the Federal Reserve Board risked igniting inflation by overstimulating the economy in 2021. The subsequent surge in prices validated Summers' concerns. Now, Summers foresees another inflationary threat in the economic plans of former President Donald Trump. There has never been a presidential platform so self-evidently inflationary as the one put forward by President Trump, Summers stated in an interview this week. I have little doubt that with the Trump program, we will see a substantial acceleration in inflation, unless somehow we get a major recession first. Former President Trump is aiming to leverage high gas and grocery prices to aid his return to the White House, though his proposed policies could worsen inflation. President Biden's approval has been hit hard by inflation, which voters consider a top issue for the 2024 election. Trump's non-incumbent status allows him to criticize Biden while his own plans go mostly unexamined. Key elements of Trump's economic philosophy, such as universal tariffs, lower interest rates, lower taxes, and immigration limits, pose significant inflation risks. Analysts highlight that these policies could lead to increased consumer costs, undermine the Federal Reserve's independence, exacerbate labor shortages, and result in higher prices for imported goods. Meanwhile, in less than a week, President Joe Biden has repeated a false claim that the inflation rate was 9% when he started his presidency. In a CNN interview, Biden asserted, "No presidents had the run we've had in terms of creating jobs and bringing down inflation. It was 9% when I came to office, 9%. He made a similar, though somewhat less specific, statement in a Yahoo Finance interview saying, "I think inflation has gone slightly up. It was at 9% when I came in, and it's now down around 3%. However, this claim is inaccurate. The actual year-over-year inflation rate in January 2021, when Biden was inaugurated, was about 1.4%. While inflation did peak at approximately 9.1% in June 2022, more than 16 months into Biden's presidency, it has since decreased to around 3.5% as of March 2024, up from 3.2% the previous month. Biden's statements misrepresent the inflationary situation at the beginning of his presidency, making it seem worse than it was, and fail to acknowledge that the inflation peak was a consequence of the Russia-Ukraine conflict and its impact on global energy and food prices. Furthermore, Biden's claims obscure that inflation was unusually low during the final months of Trump's presidency due to the pandemic-induced economic slowdown. This recent misinformation mirrors a previous false claim Biden made in October 2022 about gas prices, where he also misrepresented historical data to support his points. A White House official defended Biden's comments by stating that the president was trying to highlight that the factors contributing to inflation were already in place when he took office, attributing global inflation to the pandemic's disruption of the economy and supply chains. In the 2024 election, Trump and Biden's approaches to economic growth and inflation are central to their campaigns and voter strategies. Trump is leveraging high gas and grocery prices to criticize Biden's economic record, arguing that Biden's policies have worsened inflation and hurt American families. He is using these economic frustrations to build support for his own return to the White House. However, Trump's proposed policies, such as universal tariffs, lower interest rates, and mass deportations, have significant inflationary risks, which could potentially alienate some voters. Conversely, Biden is highlighting his administration's achievements, including job creation and reducing inflation from its peak, while framing inflation as a global issue exacerbated by external factors like the pandemic and the Ukraine conflict. His campaign focuses on the progress made since the peak of inflation and advocates for continued economic recovery through infrastructure investments and social programs. The contrasting strategies of Trump's criticism and bold proposals versus Biden's emphasis on progress and resilience are shaping voter perceptions and will play a key role in determining the outcome of the 2024 election. Inflation in the U.S. in 2024 remains a critical issue affecting the financial stability of many Americans. While the peak inflation rates of previous years have subsided, the lasting impact of elevated prices continues to strain household budgets, leading to increased debt and reduced savings. Wage growth has not sufficiently offset these pressures, and the sentiment of financial well-being has declined. As policymakers strive to balance economic growth with inflation control, the ongoing challenge will be to achieve sustainable price stability while supporting the financial resilience of American families. Thanks for watching.